In this video, we would like to share with you how to make Matcha Tiramisu from scratch. This recipe is a multi-day process. The first day, you will make the mascarpone cheese, and then the next day, you'll make the Lady Fingers, the filling, and the actual tiramisu. If you're using store-bought Lady Fingers and mascarpone cheese, you can skip the video to here for the filling part. It'll literally take less than 20 minutes to make. But if you're like us and all the Lady Fingers are out of stock at your local store, and you want to save money on some mascarpone cheese, then we have this everything made from scratch version for you. We've tested this recipe several times. After testing out different recipes, we have several failures, and we finally improved a recipe to this. Make sure to keep watching and we'll explain to you step by step so you'll succeed on your first try. The ingredients for mascarpone cheese are very simple. You just need 1 pint of heavy cream and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. It only costs half of the price compared to the store-bought. So let's get started. First, heat up the cream until it simmers. If you don't have a thermometer, just observe and predict when the cream is about to boil. It'll have a lot of tiny bubbles at the edge of the pan. If you do have a thermometer, heat it up until 185 degrees Fahrenheit. Turn the heat to low and add a tablespoon of lemon juice. We're going to thicken this cream for 5 minutes. Make sure to keep stirring during this time so the bottom part won't burn. 5 minutes later, set it aside and let the cream cool down. Wait for at least 30 minutes. Prepare a bowl and a strainer and lay a cheesecloth on top. Once the cream is cool, pour it into the strainer. Cover it with a plastic film and keep it in the fridge overnight. Letting the cream cool down is important. If you don't, the cream will still be very liquidy and you will lose the majority of the cream, like this. If you're curious, here's how it looks on the second day. We only have a small amount of the mascarpone cheese that actually survived, but the majority of it is underneath the strainer. Although it has become a large chunk of cheese, it's soaked in water, so it's pretty wet. If this is the case, you can pour it back through the strainer and let it keep draining for another night. Besides tiramisu, mascarpone cheese has a lot of other uses. We'll show you more in other future recipes. The next step is to create the Lady Fingers. Since this is for tiramisu and the shape of the fingers aren't really important, we just baked 1 large piece. Otherwise, you have to deal with a piping bag to make sure the shapes are just right. It doesn't look like a finger at all, but I'll still call it a lady finger for the entire video. Here are all the ingredients we're going to use. This recipe will result in a batter that will fill a full sheet pan. Lay down parchment paper or a silicone mat on the bottom and the sides of the sheet so that it won't stick. Separate the white and the yolks from 4 eggs. You can also add 2 extra egg whites here, and that'll allow us 2 more yolks, which can be used for the tiramisu cream later. We're going to whip the egg whites first. While whipping, gradually add a 1/4 cup of sugar until it reaches stiff peak. Then, whip the yolk with a 1/4 cup of sugar. You might notice that I haven't washed the beater. That's right, it's okay, it doesn't really matter that much and I'm pretty lazy. However, we can't do the opposite. If you're using a dirty beater for the egg whites, it will never get fluffy. Whip the yolk until the mixture becomes pale, like this. Sift in 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of matcha powder, and a pinch of salt. This mixture is pretty dry, but it's okay. Add a small amount of egg white in and gently mix it, and then pour it back with the rest of the egg whites. Use this folding motion to incorporate everything until you can't see any white parts. Transfer the batter into a baking sheet and spread it out evenly. Before putting it in the oven, dust the top with some confectioner's sugar. Bake for 15 minutes at 375. 15 minutes later, let's take a look. It smells so nice and refreshing, like green tea. It's great. Let it cool down completely on the rack, and we're going to come back and work with it when it's cooled down a little bit. Take the container you're going to use and cut out a shape that'll fit inside of it. Finally, it comes to the tiramisu filling. We're going to whisk the egg yolks, mascarpone cheese, and heavy cream separately, and then combine them together. The ingredients listed here will be enough to make a tiramisu that will fill a half-sheet pan. This can serve a lot of people. You can scale down the recipe to half, which will be perfect for 4 to 5 servings. First, we'll need 4 yolks here. This recipe requires a lot of egg separation, so if you're not great at that, this will help you train it. We're not going to use the egg whites, but we'll show you our favorite ways to use these leftover egg whites later on. In the yolks, add a 1/3 cup of sugar, 1 tablespoon of milk, and whisk it well. Heat up some water and bring it to a simmer. We're going to heat the eggs over the hot water until the temperature reaches above 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Why 160? That's the temperature the FDA recommends, so basically just cook the egg to make it so it's safe to eat. Remove the yolk from the stove. Use the mixer to whisk the eggs until it becomes 3 times the original volume and the color becomes pale. Next is the mascarpone. Add 2 cups of mascarpone cheese in a bowl together with a 1/3 cup of heavy cream. Whisk this together well until you can see the obvious trail when the beater passes through. We add the cream here so it'll be more liquidy to whip the cheese. Lastly, whisk 1 cup of heavy cream until it has a very soft peak. We don't need a stiff peak here because we're going to mix this with the mascarpone and the yolk, so a soft peak is enough. And we don't want to overly whip the cream at the end. Combine everything together and add a 1/3 cup of sugar, half a teaspoon of vanilla paste or extract, and 1 teaspoon of the alcohol of your choosing. These are the liquor options that you can use. For a kid-friendly recipe, you can leave out the alcohol. I use Kahlua like normal tiramisu. For this amount, it doesn't taste like alcohol, but it brings such a nice, wonderful flavor to the cream. Whisk everything together well, and we'll get this thick cream. Now we're going to prepare some liquid within which to soak the lady fingers. In a bowl, add 1 teaspoon of matcha powder and a very small amount of hot water. Whisk until all the powder is dissolved. Slowly add 1 cup of water and mix everything well. It would be quite bitter to drink it alone, but together with the nice, sweet mascarpone cheese, it's going to taste so great. You can transfer it to a shallow dish and soak the lady fingers in it. For our huge piece of lady finger, I had a feeling that it's going to break while transferring it between dishes, so I placed it inside and added a few drops of matcha covering evenly. Then, add half of the mascarpone cream and lay another piece of the lady finger, and then repeat the cycle. We're going to put a few drops of matcha and then cover with more cream. You can use a metal spatula to make the surface flat. Just wipe it clean after each use. Voila, that's how it looks at the end. It's still not super smooth on the surface, but it's okay. It'll be covered with matcha powder, and that will hide our mistakes. No one's gonna notice. Cover it with a plastic film and leave it in the fridge for at least 3 hours. We will add more matcha powder before serving it, so it will stay dry and look nicer. It's such a nice combination of sweet and bitter. Compared to the normal coffee-flavored tiramisu, the matcha flavor gives it some freshness and some nice bitter contrast to the sweetness. You end up with this nice creamy texture that goes so well with the ladyfinger cakes. Voila! Thank you for watching until the end, and we hope you enjoyed this matcha tiramisu recipe, and we'll hope you give it a try sometime. Make sure to like and subscribe and click the bell button to get our future recipes.